it's always easy to second guess somebody else's decisions, Keely. It's like the old saying goes, all the best coaches are in the stands. But I think given the unknown virus, things went along pretty well. I do believe that probably the shutdowns could have happened a little early. And the reason I say that is I think that if you look at the behavior of people, right after the shutdowns, I think people were very compliant in following the requests. But as the COVID numbers seemed to plateau and there didn't seem to be any big outbreaks, social distancing became less of a priority for people, and the mask wearing just wasn't happening. And then all of a sudden we saw a huge spike again. And so I think had that happened a little later, perhaps we wouldn't be in this situation right now with the spike. And I think the other thing that I kind of wish would have happened is that the legislative leadership would have had a little more input into the discussions with the executive, but that just didn't happen. And I guess finally, if I had my way, I would have had the executive do a little different job of allocating and distributing the CARES money to small businesses. I think that from a business person's standpoint, it made it pretty tough when the executive branch sat on a large amount of money for a long time and businesses were really struggling to keep their head above water. I don't think that they're as secure as the way we used to do it. I think before, when you had the option of either going to the polls or requesting an absentee ballot, the request for the absentee ballot came from an individual or a family members to a specific address. And one of the concerns I have with the mass mailing is that we have a fairly mobile society and people move, and the voter registration list was current at the last primary. I know for a fact, just dropping literature in the time, that there are houses that were occupied during the primary that are no longer occupied, but the ballots go to those addresses, and hopefully whoever recovers them either returns them to the election office or they're properly disposed of. But that's a situation that typically didn't happen with an absentee ballot, because if people requested one, they planned to be there to at least fill it out and return it. I would not. And the reason I wouldn't, I think it's been on the ballot at least a couple of times in my lifetime and has gone down with significant opposition. And I think it comes up constantly as a political issue, but I don't see that the populace in Montana is going to support a sales tax in the near future, if ever, simply because I don't believe that they trust government to reduce property taxes and or income taxes and maintain the balanced budget. I think there's a very big apprehension there with an awful lot of people that if the sales tax passes, it will be an additional tax. The other taxes will still be there. And so I think that, especially in this political climate, advocating for a sales tax is not going to be a very popular thing to do. No, I would not. And I'll tell you why. I spent a lot of years as an educator, Keely. I taught for a number of years and I was an administrator for a long time. And almost all of those years were with secondary age people, high school age people or community college age people. And over that time, I really had an opportunity to witness the effects that marijuana has on your concentration powers and your focus. And I just don't believe it's in the best interest of the state. And I think if we step back a step, one of the huge issues that everybody's talked about is the addiction crisis we have in Montana, as well as other states, with opioids, with methamphetamines, other drugs. And so I don't see any benefit in introducing another drug that is going to have some health and social issues, and very possibly, people argue with me about this, but very possibly is a gateway drug to more powerful drugs. And so I just don't think you sell your values. And I think that the social cost and the health costs that are going to be go along if marijuana is legalized are going to far outweigh the fiscal benefits to the state. I think all you have to do is look at Colorado, look at Oregon, and have some honest conversations with people about some of the effects of legalization, and it has not been a panacea. I don't support it universally. I think it was an act that was passed with the best of intentions, but had some adverse side effects that were unintended consequences. And I guess from a general philosophical standpoint, I don't think the federal government should be in the insurance business, but be that as it may. I think one of the things that happened is that the expense of individual insurance skyrocketed, and that was I'm sure was never the intent. The intent was to provide insurance coverage for greater numbers of people. In a lot of instances, the reverse happened. I know local businesses that used to have a program called Insure Montana. It was spelled E-N-S-U-R-E, Montana. They had group policies, health policies for their employees, and they were on a shared basis. The employer was not providing 100% of the policy, but he was providing a very significant portion, and the employees are picking up their share. Well, as soon as the Affordable Care Act passed, Insure Montana disappeared, and the cost of getting insurance was prohibitive. And so what has happened with a lot of these smaller companies that had 15, 20 employees is if they purchased insurance on the exchange, it was so costly, the employees didn't want it. They couldn't pay for their share. They didn't want to, or they couldn't afford to. And so you had companies that used to have health insurance coverage that no longer offer to employees. And when the employees go out individually to find insurance, they find it to be prohibitive. And so, I think it was certainly an unintended consequence, but I think it's something that is going to have to be addressed over time, both state or federally, but I don't think that the Affordable Care Act is the end all, and it's certainly not the answer to everything there. I think one of the things that's probably the most prevalent is just a desire to return back to normal, the way we used to have life before all of the COVID things. And I think along with that, problem, either a close second or maybe even equal or bigger, is drug costs, prescription drug costs. I think that there's people with pre-existing conditions or medical conditions that are really struggling to meet their expenses with drugs that are prescribed, and that's an issue that I think is on a lot of people's minds. And another one that you brought up is the state revenue. I think people are pretty astute, and as they look at the situation and realize that the state revenues are going to be down, they're worried about that. And they're worried not just because the Constitution requires a balanced budget. They're worried because there's vital services provided by the states, provided by municipalities, that they are really concerned are not going to be funded this next session or the next biennium. And so I think that's on a lot of people's mind. And then I think one that's just an ongoing one is the property tax issue. And that kind of goes back to your question on the sales tax. But I think one of the things that really has has affected and is going to continue to affect property taxes down the road is the closure of businesses. And whether that's caused by COVID or whether it's caused by online purchasing or a combination of the above, the local businesses were good property taxpayers. And when those property taxes are no longer paid by those businesses, there are really two choices by municipalities and the schools: either cut services or shift the taxes to other property owners, homeowners, people that have other properties. And so I think as people look down the road, that's going to be a huge issue 10 years from now. It is an issue now, but it's going to be huge 10 years from now. I think that I've always been receptive, and I've got an open door policy and encourage input from the constituents and try to vote accordingly. I try to vote in a way that I believe supports them and supports the input that they give me. And so I really respect the opportunity to serve them and would be honored to have their vote.